Jennifer, this is Dr. G here. Mayor Navarro is not going to be attending today.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you for letting me know that.
Sure thing.
All right, so it looks like we're waiting on Mayor Valdivia to chair. Oh, here. He's joining now. Good afternoon, Mayor. Looks like you're chairing the meeting.
Yes, Mayor. Mayor Navarro is not able to make it, so if you wouldn't mind, John, taking the gavel.
Okay, very good. Let me pull up my agenda. Stand by, please. Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Let's go ahead and begin, public and our board of directors. At this time, I will ask for a roll call, please, from our clerk.
Certainly. Please state your name for the record. Members from the city of Colton on the line.
Hi, Dr. G is here. Mayor Navarro will not be in attendance today.
Thank you very much. Members from the County of San Bernardino, 3rd District.
Good afternoon, Don Rowe.
Thank you very much. Members from the City of Highland.
Penny Lilburn, and alternate Larry McKellen is here as well.
Thank you very much. And finally, members from the City of San Bernardino.
John Valdivia.
And I don't know if I'm an alternate today, but I'm here. I'm an alternate, Fred Charette.
Thank you very much. It looks like you are it because I don't see member Figueroa on the line yet.
Okay, very good. Let's have Dusty Rigsby. Are you on, sir? I'm trying to manage my, are you there?
Yeah, he's not here at this point, John.
Okay. Let's have, I'm sorry, Penny, would you mind leading us to the Pledge of Allegiance?
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Please.
All right. Please stand and join me as we pledge to our country. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you very much, Penny. Appreciate that. This time we'll head right into our closed session, and so we will ask members, what's the direction, Ms. Clerk, on closed session? Do you want us, will you break us out, or how does that work?
Yes, I will go ahead and break you guys out. And just for the record, there is no public comment here on closed session. The public was given until 1 p.m. to send emails. I have received none, and there are none in the audience. And I will go ahead and break everyone out into the closed session section of the meeting momentarily.
Okay. Members, if you stand by, please, and we'll get assigned into the closed session. Okay, we're here, folks. I guess we were waiting for something magical to happen. So here we are. Fred,
It worked, it
we're
worked.
back, we're back together, Supervisor. Okay, all right, let's go ahead and begin. This is the open session of today's meeting of the San Bernardino International Airport Authority. This is a regular meeting held on February 24th, 2021. And Ms. Clerk, why don't we do a roll call once again for the open session, please?
Yes, please state your names for the record. Members from the city of Colton on the line.
Hi, Dr. G from Colton, and Mayor Navarro will not be attending today.
Thank you very much. Members from the city of Loma Linda.
Dusty Rigsby.
And Phil Duper as an alternate.
Thank you very much. Member from the county of San Bernardino 3rd District.
Dawn Rao.
Thank you. Members from the city of Highland.
Penny Milburn.
Larry McCallum.
Thank you. And members from the city of San Bernardino.
John Valdivia.
Fred Charette.
Thank you very much.
Okay, members, thank you very much for attending, and to our viewing audience. I'll be chairing the meeting in absence of our president, Mayor Navarro. Let's get a report from closed session. Is there anything to report out on closed session?
Mr. Mayor, there was no reportable action taken in closed session.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Huber. Moving on to item E, any items to be added or deleted?
No items, sir.
Are there any conflicts for members? Item number F. Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to item number G, informational items. This is the executive officer's report. Mr. Burrows.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and welcome, members. I want to start with another welcome. We've now finally got our entire bench seated with our new members, Council Member Figueroa, Supervisor Baca. Obviously, we welcomed Mr. Charette back previously. And with us today, Dr. G from the great city of Colton. So welcome. Those newest members attended a web-based orientation there today, and just want to thank you all for making the time. And welcome to the commission, and appreciate your leadership. The other announcement that I have is a bit bittersweet for me. I've gotten to know this gentleman pretty well over the years. And I got a little surprise the other day, as did Ms. Pritchett, that we're going to be saying farewell, but onward and upward to the next chapter. Mr. Jim Harris, our manager of capital projects, will be retiring shortly, and wanted to publicly thank Jim for his years of dedicated effort here. Many of the buildings and projects that you've seen, from the sheriff's hangar, the general aviation hangars, and on down to our air cargo facilities with UPS and FedEx and the like. I mean, it's been a real fun ride, Jim, and I want to thank you for staying the course. I will call you back when we finish Mountain View, and we will finish Mountain View, Jim. Thank you, thank you. But on behalf of the staff, I did want to acknowledge your, tireless contributions to, this operation, and we couldn't have done it without you. But, for those, on the commission and at home, Jim's had the joy in the last many moons of welcoming some new grandbabies, and those are hard to say no to. So I appreciate you very much, Jim, and thanks for sticking with us. Don't be a stranger as well. So we will be embarrassing you further, so just stay tuned. But on that note, I'm going to hand things over to Mr. Gibbs. He has some good news for you. So, Mark, if you would.
Thank you, Mike. We're very pleased to announce that on February 12th, the Secretary of Transportation announced $2 billion worth of grant funding made available to airports around the country. And from that allotment, San Bernardino was identified to receive $176,000 of funding through the newly created program. And it's intended to fund things that airport grant funds typically cannot. Typically, there's a pot of money that's self-funded through aviation uses, typically fuel taxes and so forth, that are funded to airports for things, for capital improvements, such as, infrastructure to improve safety, capacity, and security. This grant funding allotment can fund things that typically airports can't, and it flows through the U.S. Treasury's general fund rather than the Airport and Airway Trust Fund. So it does not affect our typical airport funding, formula funding from the FAA. And unlike typical FAA grants, this grant funding can be used for things such as debt service and airport operations. So again, we're very pleased to receive this grant. We submitted our application for it last week and should be funded here in the weeks ahead.
So I just buttress that, as far as, these continued programs. If you recall, in the last round under CARES, we had a smaller allocation, $69,000. The reason this amount is thankfully larger is in this most recent allocation, they did provide formula allocations based on air cargo, and that's why we went and got ourselves a much needed uptick. So we appreciate the FAA for continuing to support the airport community. Last report is a really interesting one for me. We as a commercial airport, every few years do get to, shall I say, put on a show, but not really, practice. And I want to thank Nick and Jonathan for their great work in getting us ready. So Nick, if you could kind of walk us through what's coming up.
Yeah, if Jennifer could put up the...
No, you don't want that one, do you? Okay.
There we go. Yeah, thank you, Mike. And before I get started, I'd regret at the end forgetting, I want to do a shout out to John and the operations team. They carried the heavy load. In all intents and purposes, it's an air show on a miniature scale. And his team and John put on a Herculean planning effort together with our mutual aid partners. So without further much ado, so conducting a full-scale emergency exercise really offers the best way, short of an actual emergency, to determine if an airport emergency plan actually works and is understood by all those that have a role. So what we're doing tomorrow, early evening, is going to take place from about 5 p.m. to 7 p.m., depending on how the efforts go. It'll revolve around an aircraft emergency with 35 passengers on our runway 6. And our partner Unical was so nice to provide a 757 for us to exercise on. So that was a great help in that effort. Go ahead, Jennifer. So what is it and why do we do it? So it's a test to evaluate operational capability of our emergency management system in a real-world stress environment with actual mobilizations and deployments of resources to determine that. The FAA requires it every 3 years, and on the years in between those 3 years, we do a smaller version of it, which is a tabletop exercise where we do the same thing, but we just talk it over across the table. So this really, because we're a Class 1 airport, serving large scheduled passenger air carrier operations or have the capability to, that's why we fall in that every 3-year category. We require during this test to coordinate amongst our mutual aid partners, which of course is the county fire department, San Bernardino Police Department, and many others. And during normal, shall I say, pre-pandemic environments, we would have included a much more comprehensive list of those aid organizations, but the FAA has relinquished some of those requirements, again, due to the current pandemic. Next slide. So just some of those key factors, again, testing our operational capability, evaluate our plans and procedures, mobilization of actual resources, primary roles in our airport emergency plan, And we have made some modifications due to the COVID-19 pandemic. We are simulating a large majority of the victims. We have some touchless check-in. Unfortunately, unlike last time, we can't allow viewers just to keep the crowds to a minimum. We do have some streaming video for required participants and observers. And then we will be able to post-production do a media package to distribute, to really show how those efforts played out and what we learned from them. And of course, as in many scenarios, we will be providing PPE for all participants. And the members of the board, after the fact, will be able to share that video package with you and any other information you might have about how those efforts unfolded. Thank you.
All right, so thanks, Nick, and again, thanks, Jonathan. For those that don't know, Jonathan wears a couple of hats, actually. Yeah, pretty cool sunglasses, too, actually. But he's also in charge of our airport security plan. So, you know, again, yeah, I can't wait. You guys, they won't tell Mark and I what's going to happen, so we have to wait. And there is a test later, right? So, no, just wanted to kind of fill you all in. This is kind of standard practice for airports, but there's an old saying in aviation: if you've seen one airport, you've seen one airport. Which is why we need definitely to stay on top of this, because the environment changes, and we've got to stay on top of it and stay safe. So that concludes my reports, Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Burrows and Mr. Harris. Thank you for years of service, Jim, to the airport. We wish you a lot of luck on retirement and enjoy the grandkids and all of your endeavors in retirement. Jonathan, appreciate your hard work, Jonathan Galvin, for your work on
Mayor,
this.
it looks like Member Charette has his hand raised.
And we appreciate your contributions to the community and the safety of our airport.
Member Charette has his hand raised.
Nope.
Mr. Charette, go ahead.
Ignoring me as usual, John. Thank you. No, I'm kidding. I had a question of Mark. When we were out on the tour a few weeks ago, you and Mike and I could have sworn you said something about the number of airports were 50 or 500. What was it, 50? I can't remember the context, but you brought it up and you told me that we qualified. We were doing so well. My question really is about how that $2 billion that's going to be available for how that's going to be divided up. Is it amongst 50, 500, 5,000 airports? I'm not going to poo-poo $176,000, but if you take $2 billion and divide it by a number, our share would be a lot bigger than that.
I wish it was that academic. The FAA, each round has a different kind of allocation, Fred. But this most recent round is weighted on primarily, two factors. One of which is how much debt you carry, and because we're fairly frugal as the airports go, we don't get a lot of money because we don't have bonds.
Well, then get in debt. Get in debt.
Well, yeah, don't tell Mr. Cousineau that. But the other factor is based off of how much cargo and how much passenger service you have. But Mark, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. And that's a great question, Fred. To Mike's point, it's all a formula that the FAA uses. So there's not any discretionary amounts that are distributed. Rather, to Mike's point, it's strictly by formula. So they divide airports into different categories. The first and foremost, the most important one, is we're part of the NIPIAS, which is the National Plan of Integrated Airports around the country. Without having that designation, you wouldn't receive any grant funding. But the major categories are, primary commercial service, non-primary, and then you go into our category. So we're considered a national airport under the NIPIAS, but we're also a non-primary airport.
Okay.
So from there, the funding further gets refined based on the number of enplanements and based on how much cargo you move. And I think it's important to note, too, that the level of cargo that our entitlements are based on is kind of old news. So it goes back to 2018, and there's a big lag in the cargo entitlement dollars. So as we continue to grow, even though we've had spectacular growth in that arena, it's still back a bit in how they determine the formula funding for this.
And Fred, the reason they picked a later date was to also help the medium and large hub airports that are heavily weighted on passenger service because of the significant drop in activity due to the pandemic. So they tried to be as gentle as possible to distribute the need. And of course, when you have millions and millions of dollars of revenue bonds, they need to ensure that they don't go into default, and that was one of the main strategies for the FAA. So hope that helps.
Yeah, that helps. Thank you very much.
We left off on the informational items, and we'll proceed right into item number H. This is commission consent items. And is there a motion for approval?
So moved. This is Supervisor Rao.
Thank you, Supervisor.
Dr. G will second that.
Very good. Any discussion or comments? Seeing none, Ms. Clerk, if you please call the roll.
Yes, I have a motion by Supervisor Rao and a second by Dr. G. Please state your votes for the record. Dr. G?
Yes.
Councilmember Rigsby?
Yes.
Member Rao?
Yes.
Member Lilburn?
Yes.
Member Valdivia?
Yes.
And Member Charette?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Moving on to item number I, number 10, award a construction contract to Climate Tech LLC for Hangar 763 security turnstiles. Mr. Galvan.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Mr. Mayor. The item before you is to approve the contract with Climatech LLC for the Hangar 763 security turnstile installation project in the amount not to exceed of $39,379.41, and appropriate a construction contingency of $3,938, all to improve the security access point into the AOA at the Hangar 763 location. Staff conducted a solicitation per SBIAA purchasing policy. Given the unique type of structure, only 2 qualified vendors were identified in this specialized area that could provide bids. The bidder providing the lowest cost proposal was Climatech, all to provide equipment and installation of the security turnstile. Staff requests that the commission approve this agreement so executive director can execute the service agreement to improve security and safety on the airfield.
Okay, very, very good. Mr. Galvan, that concludes your report.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. Questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion for approval.
I'll move it.
Councilman Charette, thank you, sir.
Rigsby, second.
Rigsby on a second. Are there any final questions or comments? Seeing none, Ms. Clerk, if you please call the roll.
Yes, I have a motion by Member Charette and a second by Member Rigsby. Please state your vote for the record. Member Dr. G?
Yes.
Member Rigsby?
Yes.
Member Rao?
Yes.
Member Lilburn?
Yes.
Member Valdivia?
Yes?
And Member Charette?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to item number 11. This is consider and discuss a report on the PFAS. And this item is staff report by Mr. Hubert. Sir? You're muted. There you go.
There we go. Sorry about that.
No problem.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to take a few moments and discuss with you what I think for some is a relatively new topic, but one that is going to be it will be the subject of some additional discussion in the upcoming months and years. And that is aqueous film forming foam, or AFFF, and more importantly, what you will likely hear is PFAS, or it also goes by the acronyms PFOA. And so we wanted to have a discussion with you about this because this is the foam that has been mandated to be used by the FAA for firefighting purposes. So let's get into a little bit of history of PFAS and AFFF. Jen, if you'll hit the next slide, please. one of the highlights of my year in organic chemistry in college is that I think I can appropriately pronounce the names of these chemicals. It's polyfluoroalkyl and perfluoroalkyl substances. And if you like, I can repeat that as many times as you like because my organic chemistry teacher really used to hammer pronunciation of these chemicals. But those two chemicals, PFOS and PFOA, PFOS and PFOA, are the two most widely used chemicals. You can see on the right side of the screen there the chemical makeup of them. And these two chemicals contain certain properties that really it works very well to reduce the spread of oil, water. It resists temperature changes. It's chemical and fire resistant, and it's also got some electrical insulating properties. The strength of the carbon-fluorine bond is what really is causing some of the issues here. And because of that, these chemicals, they call them forever chemicals, sort of as a colloquial term. They never break down on their own. As it mentions at the end there, now, by the way, the word or the acronym PFAS really is sort of the umbrella or overarching term for PFOS and PFOA or PFOS and PFOA. We just call it, again, PFAS is usually what we just use it as the acronym to include all of these different variants of the chemicals. But these chemicals are persistent, bioaccumulative, and toxic. And the reason why it's important, that middle word there, bioaccumulative, what that means is as the human body ingests these chemicals, typically the human body will get rid of these chemicals as well. The problem is that the body will accumulate these chemicals far faster than it can get rid of them. It takes on average about 3 years to get rid of a PFAS molecule in the human body. So that's why they call them bioaccumulative, is because as they get into your system, it takes so much longer for them to get out than it does to get in. So let's look at the next slide. The timeline of this, these chemicals were developed predominantly by 3M back in the 40s and the 50s. The process to produce these chemicals was created in the 40s. In the 1950s, there were several products that were launched utilizing these PFAS chemicals. Scotchgard is the most common one that most people have heard of at the time. They also were used in waterproofing of materials, waterproofing of canvas, waterproofing of tents, and ultimately jumping to closer to today, waterproofing of clothes as well. In 1963, the U.S. Navy sought a patent for AFFF foam containing PFAS to combat complex liquid fuel fires. And in 67, the Navy and Marine Corps required the use of AFFF foam with PFAS in it. What PFAS does is it is sort of like a large blanket that just envelops everything it touches. So it makes it so that any fire that is present just gets snuffed out. It literally cuts off its oxygen supply. Let's move ahead to the next slide. Amazingly enough, PFAS is in a number of chemicals. Food packaging, the original version of microwave popcorn bags had it in them. Fast food wrappers had it in them. Stain-resistant carpets, particularly, again, those with Scotchgard. Non-stick cookware. Just the other day, I went and purchased, about 2 weeks ago, I purchased some new cookware, and right there on the very front of the box, it said contains no PFAS, which means they recognize there has been a problem with nonstick cookware that has had that in it. Outdoor gear, particularly water repellent and durable, outdoor gear has had this in it. Amazingly enough, shampoo, paint, detergent, other liquid chemicals, aerospace, medical, and automotive applications utilize this, and many specialty items like ski wax or snowboard wax industrial applications, and most importantly for this airport, firefighting foam. Let's get on to how this works. When this stuff is applied to a hazard, it creates this aqueous film, and we'll show you a picture of it here in just a minute. But this film literally is like a big wet blanket. It just goes over everything that it touches, and it flattens out really well. But it also makes it so that it is, when it's used in an aircraft, rescue and firefighting scenario, firefighters can still walk through it. They can still access the airplane. They can still access, the doors and the inner workings of the airplane to get, people out as part of a rescue. This is of course what gives AFFF its name. It's a film forming foam, and it also works by, again, snuffing out the oxygen. It keeps liquid fuel from vaporizing and then reigniting. It really does a great job, and the problem is, again, it's a forever chemical. Once it's discharged and it hits the ground, now you have a problem. Let's take a look at the next picture there, or next slide, and you'll see a picture of it. This is what it looks like in its application on an aircraft. You see it's got the nozzle there, and they just shoot that stuff out. And my understanding, I'm not a firefighter, but my understanding is their instructions are when you utilize this, when you have an aircraft that generates a fire, you cover everything with it. You cover the whole plane, the wings, engine, ground, all surrounding it, because you never know where fuel may be leaking or where some liquid may be leaking, and where it's going to spark a fire. So by its very nature, when there's an incident, this gets deployed to a wide swath of an area. So looking at PFAS contamination, and by the way, if you have any questions along the way, just interrupt me and we can talk about it. But as far as the widespread nature of PFAS, as I mentioned from that list of chemicals, it is fairly widespread. As you can see in that map, this is a map of the military installations that are using PFAS, or that have used PFAS. And as you can see, the Air Force dots are in blue, and you can see on the map, if we were to blow it up, there is a little blue dot where the former Norton Air Force Base is, or now the San Bernardino Airport. PFAS has been used on site. We know it's been used on site. The Air Force conducted a study that is, Mike Burrows may correct me, but I think it's about 10,000 pages long.
Yeah, and I read every one. No, it's extensive, and that's something that when US EPA sent their notices to airports and water agencies, we luckily had just received that from the Air Force, and have provided that to the regional board, who are now enjoying the reading on it as we speak. But yeah, the Air Force and DoD in general were ahead of us, in the interactions with EPA.
Yeah, and so anyway, I jokingly refer to that large study. I've read some of it, not all of it, but if there is ever a cure for insomnia out there, that might be it. But anyway, Jennifer, let's go to the next slide. This is sort of what I'll call what is called the PFAS cycle. You've got it being produced over here by the production industries. It does get into the air. It gets into the water. It of course goes into all kinds of products, and then it ends up in the landfill, which then leaches into some of the wastewater treatment plant. You've got biosolids that will pick it up. You've got firefighting foam. Food products that have it will get into some of the contamination areas, and that will spread into soil and farmland. Ironically enough, there's sort of a connection between some of these biosolids and some of the farmlands. I actually read an article. One of the major groups that is afflicted with this is in the Eastern Seaboard, and the town actually received approval to utilize some of the biosolids from their wastewater treatment plant as fertilizer. It had PFAS in it, and they have now unknowingly spread PFAS over all kinds of fertile soil that has now infected all kinds of food sources and has really created a major pollution source. But anyway, once it gets into the farmland, of course, water takes it down into the groundwater. Plants can take that up. So this is sort of the whole cycle in this little, diagram of the PFAS cycle. But the real problem is really down at the bottom. When this gets into the groundwater, then you have some real cleanup issues, and they can be technical and complex and very difficult to resolve, but very important to resolve because, again, as I mentioned before, it's toxic, it's bioaccumulative. They are now measuring PFAS down into the parts per trillion in water. Now, I won't get into it too much. The San Bernardino Airport, this is public information, and we will certainly talk about this more in closed session at a future board meeting. But there is multi-district litigation going on. Some people refer to this as class action. It's similar to a class action, although it's not really a class. Every plaintiff has to file their own lawsuit, but they're all being heard in a federal district court in South Carolina by one judge. And the judge is in charge of making sure that the rulings are consistent, that they are proceeding along at a good pace. Jennifer, let's move ahead to the next slide, or next one more. So all of these cases, these are the AFFF cases, the foam, aqueous film forming foam cases. All of these involved causes of action and claims that relate to the firefighting use of this containing the PFAS. All of these cases allege, groundwater contamination, surface contamination, soil contamination of some sort. Military bases have used this since the 60s. It's been mandated by the FAA for many decades for use in firefighting, aircraft rescue and firefighting operations. Of particular note, many of the training facilities also have utilized this. In fact, every airport has some firefighting training operations. Typically, they are focused in one area. They usually are routine. They're done in the same area. And usually the cleanup is now, of course, we know when you know better, you do better. Now the cleanup is usually pretty detailed, but and many times you spray it directly into a drum or a barrel, so cleanup is not such a problem. But all of these cases are alleging that the product itself was hazardous when it was sold. It was represented as a safe chemical product, and because it never breaks down and it doesn't go away on its own, that's simply just a problem, and that can't be by its very nature declared a quote safe safe product. Jennifer, let's move to the next slide. These are the various manufacturers that are involved in this multi-district litigation. 3M, DuPont, Chemours, Corteva, many of these are smaller subsidiaries or subcorporations. Some have spun off from 3M, the original manufacturer. The good part about this is in the United States, for the airport clients who are purchasing this foam, this AFFF foam, there has been only one manufacturer of it. So for the airport, if there is any contamination from AFFF foam, there's only one manufacturer. You don't have to prove which one you bought it from, who did you buy it from, where did you get it, who was their distributor, who was the middleman. With only one manufacturer, it's an easy process as far as pinpointing who the proper defendant should be. But all of these companies are involved in the multi-district litigation. I will tell you, there is a recent, I guess I'll call it a newsworthy event. Two of these companies, and I can't remember which ones they were. They're two of the smaller companies. wanted out of the litigation and have offered up $4 billion, billion with a B, B as in Bravo, $4 billion to get out of the litigation. That is a significant event and will, I suspect, just my own hunch, will start the others to begin doing the same. But regardless, this is the list of the defendants that you need to be aware of. Let's move on to the next, the last slide here. There are over 500 cases that are currently pending. We have now done more than 35 depositions of chemists, executives, and key witnesses. The first group of cases that will be going to trial are what they call the bellwether cases, are the water provider cases. Those where you have a water provider who has PFAS or PFOA in its wells. The judge is really concerned about those and concerned about getting those cleaned up first because of their impact to the public. Once those cases either result in a judgment or result in a resolution of some sort of like dominoes, the other cases behind it will then start to resolve right away as well. But that's what's going on here at the airport. We do have, I didn't put a slide in here, but we do have the regional water quality control boards are throughout California, up and down California, are all mandating that airports study PFAS contamination. We, of course, did get a study from the Air Force, from the Department of Defense. That was an initial study. We will very likely have to do more studies on our airport, but this is an issue that we are looking at, that we are chasing down. All of the indications at this point are that we have ground contamination, but so far from the airport, no water contamination into other sources, trailing into other, aquifers. That's the initial indication that we've got right now. But regardless, we're going to be studying this because it is important for us to make sure that we protect the public, that we protect the property that we have, and that we clean up any hazardous conditions that may exist from previous use. So, with that is the balance of my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions you all may have. I deliberately did not talk about the litigation initiated by the San Bernardino Airport against some of these, or against all of these defendants. I will certainly talk to you about that in closed session at a subsequent meeting, but we did want to make sure that we, announce to you all and to the public, we are taking this head on, taking it seriously, and we're gonna tackle this problem and get things cleaned up.
And then I would just buttress, commissioners, as I mentioned in my update, at our Airports Council International Board meeting sessions last week, both Mr. Thorpe from Ontario and myself, definitely weighed in with our other airport CEOs and our ACI leadership. This is a very, very hot topic with the legislature in Washington, D.C. Airports across the country are, requesting consideration of federal funds, potentially outside of FAA sources, to help us with this compliance effort. And I'll also tell you that the FAA also joined one of those meetings and advised us on the status. They too have a mandate from US EPA that they're trying to work with, and have established a R&D test facility back east to actually attempt to develop an alternative product to the AAAF chemical. They are hopeful that they can come up with some other resources later this calendar year, possibly, which is a pretty Herculean effort because it has to be certified for use. But there's a lot of people, and the White House Environmental Council is also weighing in with EPA on this issue. So many of your jurisdictions have water providers included in your services. And being that Scott has advised that they may be, contacted and dealt with first, we wanted to keep this issue top of mind because you will certainly see it in legislative agendas. Being that we have the Fire Training Center, we are in very close coordination with Chief Muncie and County Fire on this issue, and have sought their assistance in, keeping ears to the ground and eyes open for other possibilities. But at present, we do have to stay compliant with our FAA regulations at the same time. So I have offered to the FAA and others, given that we do have a fire training center, that should they want to utilize our resource with the center to test alternative products, that we're right there with them. So it's a whole lot of syllables there, Scott, but all the tough questions you can ask him, everything else, send our way.
Okay, commissioners, we'll open it up for questions, comments. Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Huber. We appreciate the presentation. Moving on to item number 12, this is to review the status of the action plan for the airport. Mr. Burrows.
Okay, so happy February, everybody. We did scan for budget adjustments, and thankfully Mr. Cousineau did not see a need to do that. We did some work the last meeting or so, so we are flying along just fine through fiscal at this point. Next month, I will bring up any legislative issues. Obviously, as you're hearing through your respective organizations, a lot of work in Washington D.C. right now, more COVID relief, and the long-touted infrastructure bill, and we're very actively weighing in on that. Mr. Gibbs is in multiple discussions with FAA on additional grant funds, so cross your fingers on that. And then any operational updates that hopefully will include Jim telling us who his successor is going to be, but I got to work on him a little bit more on that one. And then we'll have that for you coming up in March. So still pretty busy out there. Nick and Jonathan have a lot of aircraft operations to chase, and that's a good thing. They're happy to do it. So that concludes my report.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Burrows. This is the opportunity for open session public comment. Jennifer, is there any public comment?
The public was given until 1 p.m. today to email any public comments. I received none via email, and there are no public comments here in the audience today.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Moving on to commission member comment, we'll open it up to commissioners. We want to welcome Dr. G and Councilman Charette. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to an exciting time here at the airport. We'll open it up to other commissioners for comments.
Mayor Valdivia?
Yes, ma'am.
I just have a question. It's on the good neighbor policy. I've had a lot of comments, a lot of phone calls from Highland about the flight pattern with the big planes this week. Was there something special going on? Because we've had we've seen a lot of flight patterns and a lot of flight traffic. Is there something new going on this week?
That's a great...
Mr. Burrows, Mr. Gibbs.
Yeah, thanks for the feedback, Penny. No, there were no atypical aircraft operations taking place. We did have a discussion with some nearby residents from Redlands, including some of the folks at the airport there, and we did share the Good Neighbor program with them, as we like to do. We like to cast that net far and wide so people do have some resources at their availability. But if it happened in the last week, that would be my best guess, but I don't have any real data to back up anything that changed as far as where aircraft have been flying in the last week.
Hey, Mr. Gibbs?
Yes, sir.
It's Phil Duper. Hey, what I think it might have been, and I'm not sure, maybe you can comment on this, did you reverse, and is it common to do this, reverse direction of the flight path? Because I saw aircraft coming in and landing towards the west. Is that a common thing that happens? And maybe that was it.
You know, that's a great comment, and a good point. So the control tower will commonly change the direction of flight path based on prevailing wind conditions. And we did have a few days that were quite blustery this last week, and that could definitely account for a change in flight traffic patterns.
Yeah, you have a good point. All right.
Well, and Mayor, you know, the other factor to remember is, you know, pilots' preference is typically to land from the west because that's where our instrument landing system and navigational aids are really centered. But to Mark's point, weather does affect it, and safety is the first priority for the pilots.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I personally saw a large UPS plane, and it looked like, well, it came in heading towards the east and then circled around and then landed. And I just remember if there was anybody else in my city, it was quite obvious because it flew around to the south going over my city. So I know that's a common thing, and it's probably important that we remind people that does happen, so.
Okay, thank you very much, commissioners. Are there any other comments? If not, I want to thank all of our members for your time and your involvement and service. I want to thank our staff for the airport and a lot of critical projects moving forward, and we appreciate our staff at the airport. Thank you, Mr. Burrows and team. With that, this meeting is adjourned, and thank you all. Have a good night.
Thank you.